Content warning before the video begins, we're going to be talking about the death of a child.
Today is Thursday. This presumably would have been Canon Hinnant's fourth day of kindergarten. His first day was supposed to be on Monday because he had his life stolen by this man, Darius Sessoms, because he supposedly biked on the man's lawn by accident. And so Darius Sessoms approached 5-year-old Canon while he was playing outside with his sisters, and he executed him.
Well, this is going to suck to dig into. Alrighty guys, welcome to the channel. Today we are doing a more somber topic than normal, but I already gave you guys the content warning, so you know about that. I feel really weird saying, hey, go ahead and subscribe and hit the bell notification icon and all that other fun stuff right now, but if I don't do that, then the YouTube gods will smite me, so I might as well do that. And do I do fan art for a video like this? Probably not. We're not going to do fan art for this one. I think that might be in really poor taste.
And so Darius Sessoms approached 5-year-old Canon while he was playing outside with his sisters, and he executed him. He shot this 5-year-old boy in the head point blank, and the media are silent. If you try to find this story online, you're only going to find it from like local sources, a few conservative publications maybe, but the mainstream media are dead silent about this story. And one of the saddest things that I read pertaining to this story was from the cousin of the boy's mother, who said, he will never be forgotten. And I believe that she believes that. I truly do. But the reality is that Canon will be forgotten soon. I mean, some of us might make a point to remember him, but the reality is that 2 weeks from now, no one's going to be talking about this story.
So it's not just John Doyle who's been saying this. I've been seeing Facebook posts, Twitter posts, and all kinds of other posts on social media saying that the mainstream media is somehow ignoring the death of Canon Hinnant. Fortunately, when this video was presented to me, I actually was given the name of one user who looked at least a few of the news organizations who had covered this beforehand. Introducing a user named Lucifer Morningstar, who went into the comment section of Doyle's video and pointed out that USA Today, CBS, ABC, Newsweek, Winky, WSOC, and various other news organizations, some local and some national, all have actually covered this story in depth. So thank you for that, Lucifer, but I'm going to go ahead and go a little step further as well. Now, if you go ahead and look at this list, you'll see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different articles here that are all about the death of Canon Hinnant. Some of them from places like CNN and the Associated Press, which are definitely not local news organizations. But on top of that, you can also find, through Googling, other organizations that are national like Fox News that are covering this as well. Regardless of your opinions on CNN, Fox News, or what have you, the attempt to argue that the mainstream media is not covering this is laughable at best. They are covering it.
But 2 weeks from now, 2 months from now, we will all still be talking about George Floyd. St. Floyd of Minneapolis. 2 decades from now, our children will have to memorize that name for American history exams. And we know why that is, but to the average person, that might seem a bit strange, but they probably won't question it, because people are not actually individuals. That's my favorite shitlib assumption. We all know some liberal whose entire personality is just, excuse me, are you registered to vote? Are you registered? Oh, if only more people voted. If only more people, then everything would be fine. The problem isn't more democracy, it's less democracy. We really need all the people who haven't been interested or intelligent enough to take 2 minutes to register to vote. We really need them calling the shots. Most people do not think about things. Most people do not have agency. They do not possess the internal monologue. They basically respond to stimuli and group conformity and then default to pursuing food, sex, and leisure.
So a couple things to note here. There's a difference between the deaths of Canon Hinnant and George Floyd. Both are tragic, but mind you, with a death like Canon Hinnant's, this is a death of a single individual that happened at the hands of a local resident. Whereas in the death of George Floyd, we have a death of a single individual that happened at the hands of a law officer, an officer who was supposed to serve and protect the people of the United States. Regardless of the fact that the Supreme Court said they don't actually have to do that, you do see how these things are different. Both are tragedies. Both are terribly awesome. And nobody's actually trying to deify George Floyd and say that he's a saint. That's a huge straw man. Nobody is saying that the dude was perfect. Just like nobody would say that Martin Luther King was perfect. But everyone would agree that through things that happened either to or because of them, there is a huge social zeitgeist shift happening. Not only were the perpetrators, who you need to look at in here, not the victims, different in every possible way in these two scenarios. It's not just that the black man killed the white kid and that's not getting coverage. No, that's definitely getting coverage. The difference here is also that in George Floyd's case, he did not immediately get justice for what happened, whereas within 24 hours of Cannon Hint's death, we had somebody who was sent to jail and who is being charged potentially serving life in prison. We don't know the details of that yet, or at least I do not know the full details of that yet. But we have somebody who is currently being served by our justice system. That was not something that was happening in the case of George Floyd's death, and that's why the outrage happened for so long in the beginning. It just so happened that there's a systemic issue with police violence that led to more instances of protests happening after that, over and above what happened to George Floyd, because we do have numbers and data that shows that more African Americans are killed by the police than any other demographic. That's proportionally speaking, mind you. They make up 12% of the population and yet account for a crap ton of deaths by police officers. And before any of you galaxy-brained morons try hopping in with your 1350 memes, I've already got a video covering why that's all bullshit. That's going to be in the description below. Go ahead and click it if you want to do some reading, or, watching a video that also happens to contain reading. On to the point of conformity that John Doyle tries to talk about. I find it very interesting that conformity is the basis of his reasoning here. People conform to the mob mentality where George Floyd is concerned, and there's the difference. That's the thing. That's the differentiating factor. When John Doyle, days after this, is conforming to the conservative mob mentality, that this isn't being covered by the mainstream media, when by both conservative and liberal outlets, it is in fact being covered. This screams of either ignorance or dishonesty. It is either ignorant that this is in fact being covered by multiple news outlets, or it's dishonesty in that you recognize that it's being covered by multiple news outlets, but that's not the narrative that sells. You've got to have the victim narrative, the narrative that, oh, the leftist media is against us, the media is not on our side. And I agree, the media is not on our side, but the media does enough shitty things on its own without you having to lie about it. I guess the thing to conclude here is that what John Doyle is engaging in is a form of projection, where he knows that he's basically conforming to conservative mob mentality, but he also knows that it is beneficial for him to do so. So the best action that he can engage in is accusing his enemy of that of which he is guilty.
And the reason I bring this up is because the fact that there is not national outrage about this in isolation, let's not even compare it to George Floyd for a second. The fact that this in itself is not getting people demanding media coverage for this story, it vindicates so much about what we talk about.
Except it really doesn't, because the difference between George Floyd's death and the death of Cannon, I've already laid out earlier in the video. In George Floyd's death, justice was not served, so there was a conversation to be had of a justice system that was not doing the job of justice. Whereas in Cannon's case, what conversation is there? Justice is being served. What further conversation do we have? There might be a conversation about gun control. Why did somebody have the ability to execute a child randomly? But that's not a conversation that your side of the aisle wants to have. It's not a conversation I want to have either. I'm pro-gun. Is there a conversation about mental health? Because, well, that might be an actual avenue that we have to talk about. But again, how does that conversation factor in on a national level? Yes, the death of Cannon is an incredible tragedy. This is a child. No child deserves to have their life snuffed out. But why does this have to have national media coverage? I could understand if the person who killed the child was not actually receiving their due justice, was not actually getting taken to court. Now, if he gets taken to court and then gets acquitted and doesn't actually get punished, then I will be right there beside you, trying to fight for the justice system to do what it's supposed to do. But what is the actual narrative that you're trying to push? That would be my question.
Like, if a 5-year-old white boy can be executed in his front lawn in front of his sisters, and the media won't cover it because the murderer was a black man, and as a result no one in this country cares, how do you ever expect to gain any ground? I mean, we have no cultural power in this country, but conservatives think that we're winning because, oh, Trump's in office, and the other day he totally owned this stupid liberal reporter. Cry more, leftist. Hold on, let me drink some leftist tears. Would you like to know what that is? That is a cope of astronomical proportions.
So a couple things here. One is that at least John Doyle does recognize that, yes, the leftist tears thing is in fact a giant coping mechanism. Watching and masturbating to Ben Shapiro videos as he owns random college kids on campus is nothing more than a method of trying to cope. But the other thing, I think John Doyle hits the nail on the head here. The narrative to go after is, why aren't people talking about the black man who killed the white child? Except people are talking about it. It has received national news coverage from Fox News, CNN, ABC, NBC, etc. But none of that matters, because the narrative that his audience wants to hear is that they are the victims. They have no power. They are the victims. These people desperately want to be victims. And this is a pretty common trait with people who have fascist leanings. They have to be the victim of something. You can even look at a place like Nazi Germany. What were they the victims of? An economic crisis. They desperately needed a victim mentality so that they could point out an enemy that they could fight over. That enemy for them was the Jews. The victim mentality is also the thing that Donald Trump capitalized on. Conservative workers are the victims in a narrative where brown people are coming up from the border and taking their jobs and molesting their citizens and committing crimes. It's always a victim narrative because that's what sells.
They are so overwhelmingly in charge of the narratives in this country, and as a result, what everyone thinks in this country, that a case like this is completely ignored, specifically because it was a black man murdering a young white boy, a child.
I don't know how many times I have to point out that that's a lie. It's been getting national media attention. Do you just watch YouTubers who say that it's not getting national media attention and then just parrot that shit? Or do you just look at an echo chamber in your audience that say it's not getting national media attention and then echo that shit? Because, again, you can look at the evidence. It's gotten national media attention. There's headlines in every news organization that you claim didn't do it. You claimed in your video that, oh, just a few local or even some conservative outlets took care of it, which implies that this is a huge leftist issue. But outlets that are considered left as far as the United States broken Overton window is concerned have covered this, as well as outlets on the right. So it seems like the only thing you're trying to do is claim a victim narrative that black people have all the actual social power in the United States, and it's the white people who are oppressed, because you desperately need that victim card, else you lose legitimacy.
And so when the silent majority disappears as our older generations leave us, and the generations replacing them are being indoctrinated by these narratives from infancy throughout their lives, and they're now the majority of the electorate, what then? It's over then. We will have the ultimate illusion of choice. You know, sure, we're all going to get to cast our vote because everyone's voice counts, and we all get to pick where we get our information from because it's a citizen's duty to be informed, but it won't matter. It will be a one-party state. You will have the Democratic Socialists, and you will have the liberal Republicans who will appear to be right-wing by comparison.
So this is a bit of a weird conversation to have, because here in the United States, we look at people like Bernie Sanders or AOC and consider them radicals, when they're just functional left-wingers in most other societies, most other countries. Like, if you look at Canada, most of the people we have who are Democrats look more like they're centrists. So it's really strange to me when I see John Doyle freaking out about a reality that just looks like a mirror version of art. But I think a lot of this dials back to that victim narrative issue. You see, there's this strange thing where leftists, generally, we recognize that as individuals, we are weak, and we have to try to be stronger. Most of us understand that we are, for the most part, in lower economic classes, and literally have less power. We are weaker, but through a attempt at solidarity, we can actually become stronger as a unit, become a stronger voice. The mirror issue seems to be happening on the right, where they recognize that they're in a position of strength. Most of them are in a better economic class, better economic conditions. They have more power, they have more sway in places that are not academic institutions where data is a little more important. And then they realize that, oh, for us to have the same tools that the left has, what we need to engage in is a victim narrative where we LARP being incredibly weak, where we say, no, we're actually the minorities. Us poor white folk, us poor rich people, we're the ones who are going to be oppressed. We're the ones who are in danger of this, that, or the other thing. When in reality, the terror is that they will be treated the exact same way as they've been treating people for decades. Rich people get incredibly terrified when people of lower economic statuses start rising up, because they know that they're the ones that are going to be on the chopping block, metaphorically speaking, because they're the ones that created situations in jobs where people couldn't get promotions, or the promotions they got were so small that it didn't actually keep up with the cost of living, or did things like tied their medical coverage exclusively into their job because medical coverage wasn't actually available to them in any other way because they are in a lower social economic class. They're terrified that one day the world's going to look like a mirror version of itself. What we should be doing is working towards a world where everyone is treated better. Everyone has a better shot. Instead, people are trying to work desperately against that because they're terrified that they will become the next victims, instead of trying to create a world where everybody is better off on the whole.
The point is that winning elections isn't enough. We have to actually take control of the culture. It is the only way. Otherwise, our window to win elections is only going to be open for about 10 more years.
At least in this case, me and John agree. It is not enough to get your favorite politician elected. You also need to work to change the social zeitgeist around you, because at the end of the day, that social zeitgeist dictates the people and how they're going to behave, who are going to be voting for those politicians. You want those politicians to work in your best interests? Get more people who agree with what in your best interests mean. But honestly, we've gotten decently off the original track of the video, where we were talking about why it's not okay to try to weaponize the death of a child and then lie about what the media is doing because you just want people to talk about how black people are violent, I guess? That seems to be the actual conclusion of the video. There's 5 more minutes in here, but I don't want to get into 5 more minutes of John Doyle basically activating his victim card. So I guess the thing that I'll conclude with is, please be a skeptic. If somebody is telling you that the media is not covering this and that means X, Y, or Z, maybe you should actually look and see if the media is covering something. And if you find that somebody's lying, call them out on it. And then the next thing you need to do, as a skeptic, is question why they're lying. What narrative are they trying to sell? And if they are trying to sell a narrative, to what end? Do they have your best interests in heart? Or do they have their best interests in heart, and they're just trying to weaponize you? Trying to weaponize your outrage over the death of a child that is completely and totally justified in order to argue some other vapid point. Please, be skeptical, do your due diligence and research, don't let somebody just hijack a narrative and run with it. But with all that said, if you have anything to say about this video, please let me know in the comments section below. If you have any other comments, please hop in there and engage in conversation. But given that we are beginning off of the topic of the death of a child, please keep the parents' thoughts in mind. Please be respectful. Please do not try to do exactly what John is doing here and push any narratives using the death of a child as your catalyst. Not cool, not fair, and not good. But if you have reached this stage of the video, then you are at the Patreon slides. I don't really feel like shouting out Patreon right now. It seems really strange to piggyback off of something like this and then try to go, hey, pay me money and stuff. So instead of that, I'm just gonna thank the patrons here who do make videos like this possible, do allow me to use my voice and engage on this platform in the way that I do. So thank all of you, and I hope all of you have a wonderful rest of your day, and ideally this video didn't bring you down too terribly much. As always, everyone, insert end of video tagline here.